Buckle up because today's guest brings one of the most incredible real life transformations you'll ever hear. Dr. Tony Cicoria, orthopedic surgeon turned composer, was struck by lightning and soon found himself driven to write music, gaining worldwide attention across documentaries, books, magazines, and television. His album, Notes from an Accidental Pianist and Composer, is out on major streaming platforms and digital stores. And trust me, once you hear his story, you'll want to hear his music. Hi, welcome. Dr. Tony Cicoria is joining us. And Dr., may I call you Tony today?
Please.
Or all right, thank you. You had a profound experience, and after your experience, it just kept going from there. It's evolved and really changed your life. So if you could tell me a little bit about your background growing up, and then leading into your experience.
Great. Thank you for inviting me. And um, basically, I'm originally from Kingston, New York, and that's where I grew up. I had a football scholarship to the Citadel, a military college in South Carolina. And after my 4 years there, I had decided to go to graduate school because I wanted to be one of those crazy scientists in the basement of some building. And I did my PhD there at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And at the end of it, there was a glut of PhDs on the market. So there were no jobs. There were a lot of people that had gone into school to avoid the draft. And I did the opposite. I went into a military school hoping to be a fighter pilot. And unfortunately, I failed because I'm colorblind, and I didn't realize how bad I was. At any rate, after I finished my PhD, I decided to go to medical school at the same university, at Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. And at the end of that, I had to decide what kind of a doctor I wanted to be. And I was always a very inquisitive kid, and I loved building things, taking things apart and putting them back together again. And so I chose orthopedic surgery because that seemed to be a natural aptitude for me. And then I did my orthopedic training at the University of Virginia Medical Center. And then I went into private practice in upstate New York for the next 30-something years. And then I thought I was going to retire in 2018, and I tried it for 4 months and hated it and went back to work. But we had moved to Maine, so I started working up there. And that was kind of my life pathway. And I was originally on a pathway to become an academic orthopedic surgeon. So I wanted to be at a big university, and I wanted to be publishing lots of papers and being head of a department someday. And that was kind of my overall plan. All of that changed in 1994. And what happened was my wife had 5 people that had birthday parties in August. And so we rented a pavilion next to a lake called Sleepy Hollow Lake in Athens, New York, which is just below Albany, the capital. And I was given the job of running the barbecue. It was a beautiful morning out, and I had my back to the lake. I wasn't paying attention to that. And at some point that morning, I think it was mid-morning or late morning, I was going to go call my mother, who was not there, and check on her. And I got somebody to cover the barbecue, and I walked around the building because there was a payphone on the other side that I had seen. And what I was not aware of is that the beautiful day that it was had turned ugly, and there was a big thunderhead over the lake. I didn't know it. And when I walked around to the front of the building and I pick up the phone and I call my mother and I let it ring 5, 6, 7 times and she didn't answer. So I thought, well, there's no point in hanging on. I'll try later. And I had the phone and I was taking it away from my face and got to about here. And this huge flash of light came out of the phone and hit me right in the face and just threw me back like a rag doll. And there was this huge crack right after the flash. I knew exactly what it was, and I'd been thrown back with a tremendous force, and I was just flying backwards. And then all of a sudden, the strangest thing happened. I started moving forwards, and I remember thinking, "What the hell is going on here?" I said, I saw the light, I saw the flash, I knew I got thrown backwards, and I didn't understand what the moving forward was. So I'm standing there, I'm at the bottom of the stairs, the family's up on the second floor. I look at the telephone that's on the wall, and it's just dangling back and forth. And I'm trying to make sense of this because nothing is making sense. And I'm looking around, and I see people all over the place. And all of a sudden, I hear my mother-in-law screaming. She's at the top of the stairs, and I'm at the very bottom. And she's screaming, and she's running at me, and I'm thinking, this can't be good. You know, when your mother-in-law is screaming and running at you, things are not in good shape.
Yeah, no.
And so she's coming down the stairs at me, and I'm looking at her, but she's not looking at me. She's looking off to her left. And I thought, this is really strange. So I was like a deer in the headlights. I'm just standing there. She gets down right in front of me, but it's like I don't even exist. She passes right in front of me and takes off to her left. And, my only thought was, I'm going to follow her. So I turned and I started walking right behind her. And I took about 3 steps, and I was confronted with myself on the ground. And I remember thinking, oh shit, I'm dead. And it was such a shock to me, no pun intended,
Right.
that there was no notification. There was nothing. It was just 1 second I was alive and I was in my body. The next second I'm standing here. I'm separate from my body and the dead guy's over there on the floor. And I'm like, I walked over to it and I'm looking at it, and there was a lady who was standing there waiting to use the phone behind me. Turns out she was a nurse. So she starts to get down to do CPR, and I'm standing there watching, and I can hear everything that everybody's saying. I can see everything, and I was like, my brain is racing. Not my brain. My mind was racing,
Mm.
and all of a sudden it occurred to me that I'm thinking exactly the way I normally would, and I thought, oh my God, whoever I am, I always am. So this thing on the ground is nothing more than a change of clothes. And the real me is right here. And, I'm still here. So my spirit lives on completely. It has nothing to do with this dead body on the floor. And so, she starts CPR, and I'm standing there watching, and I hear everybody hollering and screaming, and I turn around and I said, I'm not going to stand here. There's no point in that. So I decide I'm going to go check on my family. So I go to the stairs and I start walking up. And as I'm walking up, I'm looking down at the ground because I don't want to trip and fall on my face, which I have done. Um, and as I'm walking up the stairs, I see my legs are starting to dissolve and lose form. And I remember thinking, whoa, this is getting really strange. And as I got to the top of the stairs, I had lost all form. I was just a big ball of energy. And at that point, the stairs go off to the left, and I didn't bother. I went through the wall. And what was interesting is when I got through the wall, I had actually exited the wall right over where my wife was sitting, and she was painting children's faces. So she had all these kids lined up, and she was painting their faces, and I memorized the kids and who was there, what order they were in, and then I also memorized all of the furniture, the way it was set up. And that was going to be a big point later on when it came time to verify what I saw. And I'll come back to that. I pass over her head and I'm kind of going diagonally through the room. And when I went through the roof was when things really kind of got wild. Because all of a sudden I had fallen into this river of pure positive energy. And there was this bluish white light coming from a big source off to my right. And it was radiating this energy and if you can imagine absolute love and absolute peace, it was the only thing that was coming from this light source. And I remember thinking, oh my God, this is incredible. This is the most incredible thing that anyone could ever go through. And as I looked at that energy, I started looking at it very critically, and I could actually see the lines of the energy. It looked like a sine wave, though it was a low frequency energy. And I could see that this energy made up everything, and it flowed through everything. It created everything. And I remember thinking, this is the God energy. This is what it's all about. I could measure this. My science brain is going, oh yeah, let's do that. And and so as I'm standing there, I'm thinking this is the greatest gift that anyone could ever have, to be able to know this and to see this and to feel it. And so I was going in this stream of this energy. I didn't know where it was going, but it was taking me someplace. And as I'm floating in this energy river, I see this wall that I'm passing, and the wall is like a collage of my life. So there was pictures on the wall, and as there wasn't any in-depth discussion about it. It was just, these are all high points and low points of your life, and I was just kind of floating by and didn't really go into much of it at all. I was really, at that point, I was so excited about where I was going, even though I had no idea. And then right about the time I was ecstatic about where it was going, all of a sudden, boom, like somebody flipped a switch. I was back in my body, and geez, it hurt. I had a burn on my face. I had a burn on my foot where it hit me and where it came out. And I'm still unconscious. I can't move. I can't say anything. But I'm stuck in this body. And the girl who was doing CPR stopped, and she was kneeling next to me. And I could feel that. And then it took a number of minutes before I could open my eyes. And then I remember thinking, I want to thank this woman for saving my life. And when I opened my mouth to say something, the only thing that came out was, "It's okay, I'm a doctor." And she just laughed and said, "You weren't a minute ago." Oh God, I'm gonna shut up because I'm not making any sense. I was embarrassed. So I, I
Mhm.
I shut up, and the police came and an ambulance came, and I said, "I'm not going to the hospital. I know what that's going to be like. I'll sit there for 4 hours, and they're going to tell me I'm alive, and they're going to send me home." I said, I can do that myself." And so I said, "No, I'm not going." And I asked my family to take me home because I could call my friends who were a cardiologist and a neurologist, tell them what happened,
Mhm.
and ask them if they would check me out. So that's what we did. They took me home. I went to their office and they checked me out and did all the things they were supposed to do. And they said, "Yeah, you're alive. You don't seem to be any real different." And but there was something that was different. I could not remember people's names, so I could look at you and say to myself, "I know you. I know you very well. Damn if I could find your name." It was in a drawer someplace in my brain, and I had no access to it. So, obviously, the circuits had been shaken up pretty good.
Mhm.
And but I stayed home that following week, and by the end of the week, my brain was back to normal. I could remember people, I could remember the diseases.
Mm.
And those were the things that I noticed that I didn't have access to. And so I went back to work and then I was mystified. I'm like, what the hell was all that about? And I thought about, what's the probability of surviving something like this? And I thought, you know, the lightning, which is normally millions of volts, and the lightning had to lose some of its juice before it got to me. Otherwise, it would have turned me into a French fry. So it hits the building, travels through the lines, loses some of its current. By the time it gets to me, it's still got enough to stop my heart, but no big damage. And I thought, okay, that's pretty crazy to begin with. And then to have a nurse standing there behind me so that just in case I got a little too much of the current,
Right.
she's there to bail me out. And I started thinking about calculating the probabilities of those things, and it's just astronomically impossible. And so then I was convinced that, okay, there's more to this story. So, I was, and at that point, I was trying to understand something that's not understandable. I started reading anything I could get my hands on. And interestingly enough, the first book I ran into was a book called Saved by the Light by Daniel Brinkley.
Hmm.
And Daniel had also been struck by lightning when he was on a phone, and they coded him for 2 straight hours, and they finally gave up and pronounced him. And the morgue attendant took his body and they were putting him in the freezer, and the morgue attendant saw the sheet move. And
Whoa.
what happened, Daniel said, I couldn't move anything, so I blew on the sheet. And that's what the morgue attendant saw. He saw that the sheet move,
Oh
and he
my goodness.
grabbed him and throws him back on a stretcher and runs down the hall to the emergency room, and they resuscitate him again, and he's still alive today. But he had a profound experience. He was dead for hours. And so he got to see a huge amount of stuff on the other side, and it's pretty remarkable.
And
And, he talks about all the different things that he had to go through. He was a military assassin. That was his job. And one of the things that he had to experience when he was on the other side was he had to be among the family members of the people that he killed.
wow,
And he had to see their pain,
how it affected them.
how it affected them. And it had a profound effect on him. So, it was really kind of crazy. So at any rate, I went about going back to work, and I'm just carrying on my normal business, except one thing that was weird. All of a sudden, I started having this insatiable desire to hear classical piano music, which was a big departure for me. I was a kid of the '60s. There was rock and roll, and that was about it.
I have
Um,
to I have that's one of my questions. I have to know, what did you have a favorite rock and roll band? Or
uh, I loved all of it. The Beatles and Black Sabbath, and
Mhm,
it was just I loved everybody from the '60s and '70s. Um, that was that was my uh, that was my upbringing,
mhm,
and so I so piano music was not much for me. My mom
mhm.
made me take piano lessons when I was 7 years old for a year. I hated it. Wanted to do with it. So man, my year was up. I was out of there, and I never went back. And so, wanting to hear and play piano music was really strange for me, but it was overwhelming. It was like I couldn't think about anything else. And I finally went to a music store in Albany because nobody had classical CDs locally. And as I walked in, a CD of Vladimir Ashkenazy, a famous pianist, um, literally jumped off the shelf into my hands. And I remember looking at it going, okay, this is pretty weird. Um, and it was, he was playing his favorite Chopin.
Mhm,
And so I bought the CD and I went home and I started listening to it, and I was absolutely possessed. I couldn't
mhm.
stop listening, and I made everybody else listen to it. I even took it to work and made the people at work listen to it. And I'm sure they were like, what the hell is wrong with him?
Like, they might not be getting the same effect of it as you were, right?
No,
But
not even close.
but when you finally started listening to that music for the first time, did it how did it make you feel? Was it just all kinds of feelings that are hard to explain? Excitement, peace?
I was literally possessed by it.
Mhm,
And I don't know what, what the feeling was that I was getting from it, but it was that connection. There was something that connected what I experienced out of my body with
mhm,
this music. And it became very clear that just listening to it was not going to be enough. I needed to learn how to play it, but that was a problem because I didn't have a piano and I had no idea how to play it. But, you know, when the universe wants something to happen, it happens.
mhm,
And so, the next day after I have this epiphany about wanting a piano and wanting to learn how to play it, one of our babysitters came over and said, I'm moving, but I have my father's old piano and I need a place to store it for a year till I get settled. Would you let me keep it here?
It's
I'm
like
like,
it just jumped into your hands
okay.
again.
And I'm like, here we go. So all of a sudden there's a piano,
Mhm.
and I bought a couple of books to learn how to play, and I thought, well, I can teach myself. What a joke. But being undeterred, I also ordered the sheet music that was on the CD, thinking someday I'll be able to play this.
Mhm.
And so I started trying to teach myself using these books how to play, and I started trying to learn the music on the CDs. And And after, I am sure it must have been a year or so afterwards, of literally butchering this music. Um, I was trying to learn a piece of music called a fantasy impromptu. It's one of the Chopin famous pieces. And I was trying to play it, and I couldn't understand why the hands didn't line up. And I was trying to force it to, and it's impossible. And my daughter's best friend was over, Jackie Cypress, and her mom is an accomplished violinist and professionally trained. And she heard me banging on the piano and could hear me swearing, and she walked me, goes, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't understand this." I said, "The hands don't line up. I can't play it." And she looked at me and said, "They're not supposed to." "What do you mean they're not supposed to?" She said, "It's called a polyrhythm." And I said, "What's that?" And she said, "I'm going to try to explain this to you. Go get a teacher." And, and at that point, she gave me the name of Sandy McCain. And Sandy was trained at Juilliard, and she was the head of the Department of Music at Hartwick College at the time. And so I gave Sandy a call, told her that I was an old guy trying to learn something new, and
Mhm.
she'd consider taking me on as a student. So she brought me in for an audition, told me to bring 3 pieces of music I wanted to learn how to play, or I've been playing with,
Mm.
and I played I played what I brought, and she said, "Okay, I'll be glad to take you on as a student, but you are not allowed to play any of these things until I tell you you can, as you are developing terrible habits already, and you need to start at the beginning."
Mhm.
Okay. So that's what she did. We started working 2 hours a week together at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was the only time we had available. And this went on for years. Um, and backing up a little bit, after the piano showed up, so this is now, probably a month after the lightning strike, I have a dream. And in this dream, I'm I'm walking out onto a stage, and I look at the front of the stage, and my body and myself is out on the front of the stage, and I'm playing at a concert hall. And I remember thinking, looking around at the concert hall, and I remember drawing a picture of it. Was that clear? Um, and all of the balconies were very ornate and very recognizable. And I remember walking out onto the stage, and I'm walking toward myself, and I walk all the way up, and I'm standing behind myself, and I'm watching myself play, and I'm listening to the music. And all of a sudden it comes to me that this is not somebody else's music. This is mine. And I'm thinking, what? And so I'm paying attention to it, and the ending has a loud crashing ending and of this piece of music, and it woke me up. And I remember looking at the clock, and it's 3:15 in the morning. And I went out to the living room where the piano was, and I started plunking notes out, seeing if I could recognize anything. I had no idea. I had no idea how to write, no idea how to play. And at that point, I said, "The hell with this. I'm going back to bed." So I went back to bed, and I woke up at 5:30, which is what I normally would, and got ready for work. And then the strangest thing started to happen. Every time I went near that piano, the music from the dream would start playing. And if I didn't pay attention to it, it would become intrusive. It would start playing when I didn't want to. and I thought, okay. So I learned very quickly that I needed to do something with this music every day. Otherwise, it would annoy the hell out of me until it did. So that became my ritual, and I would try to learn to play different parts of it. And I even started writing down little snippets on pieces of paper, um, things that I could manage to at least write down something that was recognizable.
Mhm.
At the time, I didn't know anything about writing music, so it was just a lot of stick figures um, but it was at least something on the note,
Mhm.
um, so that I could go back later on. My plan was to go back and put it together at some point in my life. I had no idea where this was going. When when I would start working on my piano lesson that I had given myself, um, it would still play. And when I started doing music with my teacher, it would still play. And I would tell her about what I was what I was hearing. And, she would say, "Oh, hum for me what you're hearing."
Mhm.
Do that. And, she would say, "Well, that's a 5/4 rhythm and you have to write it this way." And I'm like, what? I thought, this is crazy. But, this kind of went on for quite some time. And then I was making progress in learning how to play. And in 2002, so now fast forward to 2002, I started going to a thing called Sonata, which is a piano camp for adults in Bennington, Vermont. And it's something that meets monthly, um, and each time you go, there's a group of 30 people who are as possessed with piano as you are, and it's pretty crazy. Um, And one of the assignments is at the end of your week, you have to play something for the group,
Mhm.
that you've learned. And so, each year I would, plan on playing one piece, and that's kind of the way I was going about learning how to progress in this new endeavor. And so that started in 2002. In 2006, I go to piano camp, and I'm going to play a Chopin scherzo, um, which was a long piece. Um, as I recall, it's 26 pages, um,
Wow.
and you had to memorize it when you played these things. And so I went there, planning to do my little thing. And when I got there, the owner's sister was there. First time I had met her. And she was also a concert pianist, but she worked at the Steinway showroom in New York City, and she was the number one salesperson there. Um, and because she had memorized all of the pianos in the entire building, and she could tell which one was the qualities of each piano. She had them all stored in her brain. So if somebody came in and said, "I want a piano that's got a light feel and a brighter sound," she knew exactly where to find one. Um, but we got talking, and she was asking me what I was going to play, and I played for her, and she said, "Wow, you haven't been doing this for very long," and it's unusual for somebody who's only been playing for 10 years. Um, to be able to play this stuff and play it proficiently. And so she was quite impressed with the fact that I had an aptitude for it. I told her the whole story about the lightning and the music that
Mm-hmm.
came afterwards. And she said to me, she said, this story needs to be told, but there's only one person that can tell it. And I said, really? Who's that? She said, Oliver Sacks. And at the time I said, really? I didn't even know who Oliver was, other than
Right.
the fact that he's the guy that wrote the book Awakenings. And he was a famous neurologist.
Mm-hmm.
And that was all I knew. And what I also didn't know is that they were best friends. So when I left, this was in May of 2006. When I left the piano camp after a week, I went home, and I think I must have been home a week, and the phone rings, and it's Oliver Sacks. I'm like, crap. And he says, I was talking to my friend Erica, and she tells me about this wacky guy in upstate New York who got struck by lightning and has had all these weird things happening. And he says, I'd like you to come down to New York City and be interviewed, because I'd like you to be one of my patients, and I have a collection of people like you. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I said, absolutely. So in August of 2006, I go down to Oliver's place in New York City and got to spend the entire day with him, which was just an incredible, incredible thing for me. What an amazing man, an amazing mind. And we talked about all this stuff, and he said, I think that, you've had some circuits that were scrambled. He said, I don't think your brain is functioning the same as it was. He says, but I'm not quite sure what happens next. But we continued talking for years, up until he died. And we would talk about, where did the music come from? How did it possibly have this effect on you? Did the lightning rewire your brain and gave you access to portions of the brain you didn't know you had? So there were lots of questions and no answers.
Yeah.
And so at the end of that day, we're standing in his doorway, and he looks at me, and he had this piercing eyes that look right through you. And he says, the music from the dream went through an awful lot of trouble to get here. The least you can do is write it. And I thought, wow, I'm going to do that. But, I had no idea how to write. So I went home, and the first thing I did was I went to a store, electric store, and bought a music writing program called Sibelius and an electronic keyboard. And so with this program, if you played something on the keyboard, it would translate it into musical score.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was pretty amazing. And so even though I had no idea how to write, um, I could edit a little bit, and the music was always exactly the same in my head when I listened to it. So it made it easy. I had an internal control. If I wrote something on the paper and then I played the music back, either it was or it wasn't correct. And so that was a good way to do it. And then I started working on that music, and I was so obsessed with what he told me, that I spent every waking hour that I wasn't at work working on this music. So I would get home, 6, 7 o'clock at night from work, and then I would sit at the piano until I couldn't see straight, 12, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, whoa. And, but I just kept it up. My goal was to play it at my next May piano camp. And so that I worked really hard at it. I finished it about 2 weeks before the piano camp. So I brought it up there, and for my my concert piece, I was going to play that piece of music. I didn't have it memorized, but so they would have to put up with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so I played it, and it was well received. And the last day I was there, the phone rings. It's Oliver. And he says, "I'd like to use your story in my book." And I thought, okay, I don't have anything to hide. And the name of the book is Musicophilia, Tales of Music and the Brain. And he says, "You're chapter 1. I said, "I am?" He goes, "Yeah." And he says, "Not only that, but chapter 1 is going to be profiled in the New Yorker magazine on July 23rd.
Wow.
And I'm like, "Wait a minute, like this July 23rd? And he goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh, Jesus, I don't know if I'm ready for this." And sure enough, out it comes, and the phone starts ringing. And one of the first phone calls I got was from a guy named Carlton Clay. Carlton was the head of music department at the State University of New York in Oneonta, which is where I lived. And he said, "I just read this article." He said, "I'd like you to teach a class." And I thought, okay, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
So I agreed to it. And then about 2 weeks later, he calls back and he said, "Geez, you would not believe the number of phone calls I'm getting about this story." He said, "Would you play the music for the class?" "Sure, I can do that." And then this went on, and I continued doing what I was normally doing. And then a month later, he calls back and he says, "Geez, I hate to do this to you," he says, but he said, "There's been such a groundswell of people asking and calling about this. Would you consider doing a concert at the Performing Arts Theater?" And I said, "No, I'm not doing that." I said, I've never done it before. I have no idea how to do it, and I'm not going to do it." So that was my initial stance. And by the time he finished with me, he got me to agree to it. I'm like, "Oh, Jesus." And at that point, I was like, "Oh my God, what have I done?" And so I called my piano teacher and I said, "Sandy," and she knows Carlton very well. And I said, "Carlton got hold of me and conned me into doing this thing." And I said, "I don't have the faintest idea." I said, "Is there any way you can get me ready to do it?" And she said, "I can." She said, "But you're going to have to give me 3 hours a day from now until then." And I said, "Jesus, I don't have 3 hours a day." He said, "You're going to have to make it because you will not be successful if you don't." And I was like, okay. So I committed myself to, doing 3 hours a day with her. And we did it. It was just, we started from walking into the theater and walking up to the piano and addressing the piano and talking to the audience and, everything about how to do this. And by the time the day is coming, which is going to be January 29th, 2008. So Oliver's book came out in 2007. And so in 2008, I picked my birthday because it was kind of like a rebirth,
Yeah.
and that was going to be the day of the concert. And so as it turns out, they decided to have 2 days back to back because there were so many tickets sold. They had to have a 2-day concert. And as the time approaches, now we're probably a month away. It's December, and I get a phone call from Carlton again. And now I'm scared because every time Carlton calls me, things change. And he says, "You won't believe this." And I said, "I don't. I don't believe it for a second." And he said, "I've got 3 television camera crews that want to film this." I
Oh,
said,
putting on the pressure.
"Oh God, Carlton, I can't do that." He goes, "You have to. You've come too far now." I'm like, "Oh my God." And so they come, and BBC One, uh, um,
I saw, like, Granada Media UK
yep,
and German National Television.
yeah, all 3 of
Yep,
them,
all 3 of those.
and they all show up, and I'll never forget it. I walk out onto the stage and I look up, and there's all these cameras and lights, and I just wanted to turn and run. And I remember going to the green room before the concert, and I remember saying my prayers, and I said to God, I said, "You know, you've put me through a whole lot to get here." And I said, "Please don't leave me out there by myself and embarrass us both." And so I thought, it's either it's gonna be okay or it's not. There won't be any in between. And so, I talked to the audience, um, and then introduced them to where the music came from, why it was written.
Mhm,
There were 3 different pieces. Each one had a different meaning, and the first piece that I was gonna play was what I call affectionately the Lightning Sonata.
mm,
Uh, and it's not a musical, form sonata because that requires a specific, um, kind of a writing. It's technically what's called a fantasy in structure, but you can subtitle it anything you want, so
okay.
Fantasy, Opus 1, The Lightning Sonata.
Mhm,
And so I told the audience about it, and it was, it was packed, standing room only, both nights. And I managed to get through the music without embarrassing myself, which I was grateful for. And I, I was able to get through it, walk off the stage, and thought, wow, I don't think I could do that ever again. But I was going to have to do it the next night again. So, that wasn't true. And from there, it just took on a life of its own. Uh,
mhm,
I was asked to play all over the country in different venues. A lot of the places that I played at were chapters of the International Association of Near-Death Studies.
mhm,
Um, and I even was asked to be a keynote speaker at their big yearly meeting in 2012 or 13. I can't remember which. And I even got to play at Mozart's home in Vienna.
Wow.
which was really kind of an incredible experience just to be in this home. Um, and, it was interesting because the music that I have written has all been music that was downloaded into my brain, either from the dream or from some other experience. It all comes as one big flush of music, and then it's a struggle to get it written down. And it's interesting to me that Mozart described something very similar. He said, "The music always comes to me in finished form, and all I have to do is write it down."
Huh.
And I thought, that
Wow.
sounds very similar to what I have experienced. And but I was able he had a concert hall in the basement of his house. Um, and I got to play there. Um, and it was an incredible experience. And, and then, the music has continued to come. Again, it has a life of its own, and it's become more complex in forms. I've done, I have started a symphony. I did a piano concerto for piano and orchestra, which I played in 2011 at the Piccolo Spoleto Music Festival in Charleston, South Carolina. And so it's been quite an adventure, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Thinking back to that vision you had about observing yourself playing your own music just kind of came full circle, didn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, it wasn't a premonition. It was an absolute reality of this is what your life is going to be. The things that I thought were important before the lightning um, didn't matter. My dreams of being a hotshot in academic orthopedic surgery absolutely vaporized. I didn't care a single thing about being who I thought I was supposed to be. Um, it became very clear that I was doing something that was important for other reasons, service to others, which the pathway of spiritual growth.
Yeah. And not only just listening to your, hear people hearing your story, uh, but also connecting with your music. And I mean, I was watching the documentary you were featured in, Music Instinct,
Mm-hmm.
that was done by, I'm going to say her name wrong, Elena Manis or Manus.
Yeah.
And um, I thought it was interesting. They brought up in that documentary how, we get, we all have experienced that, like where we get goosebumps from hearing, music sometimes. It's so interesting that, it's, we are, everything's made up of, vibrations. And that documentary was so interesting how it talked about, somebody playing music. You're getting that connection because those sounds are, or hearing it, and it's really like connecting us, and and getting, goosebumps when you hear music is, you're getting that physiological reaction. You can't really explain why it happens when it does, but something about it. And so I think that's so cool, So your experience, and it sounds like it was so wonderful and incredible. Has that just resolved any fear or any worries or anything about the other side? And
Yeah. Yeah, I grew up Catholic, and one of the things that happened for me was that I became much more spiritual and less religious.
Mhm.
And because my religion didn't really address any of the things that I knew to be true because I went through them. Um, so I was completely at peace with the fact that we are here and we are wearing these clothes
Mhm.
of whoever we are at this moment, but that's not who we really are. Uh,
Mhm.
and that who we really are, our spiritual self, lives on and grows and evolves. And so our reason for being here is to learn and to become a higher level of spiritual self.
Mhm.
Goal is to be able to join with the source once again. But you have to prove yourself worthy of that,
Right.
and that takes time. So you keep cycling back through this. You know,
Mhm.
you meet with advisors on the spiritual side that, what am I going to go back and work on?
Yeah.
And you have a plan, and you actually, from everything I've learned and talked to people who've been there, um, you have a hand in designing what you're going to learn.
Mhm.
So if you have a horrible life, you don't have anybody else to blame but yourself because you said, "I want to learn this."
Right.
It's like, okay, what the hell was I thinking?
I know.
It's like, so, there's so much more to why we're here and what we're doing.
Mhm.
And, there's just, it's so important to recognize and to raise your conscious level of
Mhm.
thought and to be someone who lives service to others as opposed to service to self, because that's the pathway of spiritual enlightenment.
That's such a great message, and I hear it all the time through these experiences people have had uh, that what matters most is service to others, being kind to others, how you make others feel. Your music is and talking about your experience, it's probably helping people more than you realize. I mean, you don't see how many people are getting to, connect with it and watch your, interviews like I had, and how it moved me so much. Um and once you did record your album Notes from an Accidental Pianist and Composer, right?
Yep.
And I saw that, I found some of it on Spotify. I also saw I could find it on Amazon if I wanted to order a CD. And then your Fantasia, the Lightning Sonata, that was on there. Was there a sense of Did you get a sense of resolve after you finally got that music recorded? Um, or have you still felt like, almost like, the job is not done, like you still have those pieces come to you, those things that you want to get out there, musically?
Yeah, there's still, it's very clear to me that I'm not done with this.
Mhm.
Um, and I have been feeling an urgency to write a book about it.
That would be wonderful.
And I'm working on that now. But the music still continues to flow toward me.
Mhm.
uh, and, I go through periods where I'm pulled in one direction versus another,
Mhm.
but it always circles back and kind of recenters me and says, "All right, bucko, you need to get back on the pathway here." Well,
And you're very unique because you have that scientific mind, but you've also had this profound mystical experience as well. I don't know how you reconcile those two frameworks together. I know you had said for a while you didn't tell people about, this experience, and maybe now it's a little more accepted than it was back then, right?
yeah.
Uh, did you find that when you started uh, talking about it, because once you did, like, with Oliver, I mean, people wanted more. They wanted to hear your story. Did you find that there were some of your colleagues maybe that weren't as accepting of it? And
Yeah, when this first happened, it was so we're in the mid '90s.
mhm,
Uh, that was not an acceptable thought. It's like for a physician to be saying, I'm seeing dead people, or I've had this
right,
experience, and it was not accepted. And in fact, I was afraid that if I told anyone, somebody would call the state and try to get my license taken away. Uh,
mhm,
that was not out of the realm of possibilities. Um, but and so I was very selective about who I told,
mhm,
and things kind of spread. Even with that, and of course, when Oliver got hold of it, all hell broke loose, and he took it out of the closet and said, "Okay, everybody, look at this."
yeah,
Wait a minute. Wait, wait. Yeah.
right, right.
So
And so, do you believe that this experience sort of unlocked something that was kind of latent within you, or just it was something entirely new?
I have to think that my brain was rewired to
Mhm.
some degree,
Yeah.
and it gave me access to areas that I didn't know I had. So, it makes you think, okay, is everything every lifetime that we've ever lived somehow recorded
Right.
in place, or is it in our DNA? And, you shake up the DNA and guess what? Things start to show up. And there are enough people that this has happened to that you have to believe that that's true. Uh,
Yeah.
that we've got enormous abilities in our brains that we don't even know we have, we've never used, or that we don't even have the electrical connections to hook up to it. And
Mhm.
somehow the trauma of the lightning forced these connections to mate.
Mhm.
Suddenly, I'm in some ways a different person.
Mhm.
There are there are so many people that have had brain trauma or surgery or near death or any number of things. And all of a sudden, they have abilities that they didn't know they had.
Mhm.
And one of the physicians that I met, Daryl Treefort, who is a specialist in savants. So this is somebody that has suddenly a an ability that they didn't have before. And
Mhm.
so he had asked me to be one of his patients as well, and I got to meet a lot of people like me that just had all these, had all these weird experiences happen to them after they had some kind of an injury. Um, and so having seen that, then I'm faced with, okay, so this is a real possibility. We if it can happen by accident, it can happen by purpose as well.
Mhm.
And the problem is we don't know how to turn these things on and off. So there's got to be a way, because if it can happen in nature, it can happen. outside of nature.
Right.
Um, you got to know how to do it, and at this point, we don't know how, but there has to be some commonality that allows you to do it, and it's just a matter of figuring it out. And somebody will, by accident, figure it out someday. But in the meantime, yes,
Yeah. When has this experience changed your relationship with just kind of sitting in silence? I mean, do you hear that music kind of coming to you? Then are you thinking about that? Does it come to you all the time, or I
I
mean,
have had to filter some of it,
mhm.
but when I'm sitting quietly or I'm sitting at the piano and being quiet or doodling on the piano, um, it flows and
Mhm.
it's coming. And when it does, it comes in torrents. It's like this huge amounts of information suddenly appear, and it's like, oh my God, how do I deal with it?
It's
Um,
how to get it from here to
yeah,
there, right?
like, but thankfully, when it comes, it stays.
Mhm.
It's not fleeting. It's like it's downloaded in, and sooner or later, I'll get to it.
Well, and that Lightning Sonata is such a beautiful piece. There's so many different, like, emotions within it, like, it you
It's a
just
real roller coaster.
yeah, it really, I was trying to find a way to, like, describe as I was listening to it. It just goes through so many different emotions, and so I don't know. I was really excited. I had to go listen to it as soon as I heard your story. I just wanted to listen to it, and I think that's yeah, that's part of your legacy now. That beautiful piece of music that you're able to. I hope that you're continue to compose things, because that is quite amazing. Um, Oh gosh, when I tried to learn piano, I wanted to learn so bad, but I could not get one. I got one hand down, but just the other one wouldn't do. It's like once, I'm like, man, I am good at Oh Susanna. And then I go to do the other one, and I can't do both of them at once. So,
Yeah.
um,
It it's
so
a challenging instrument.
for anybody who has not tried playing the piano, and then reading music on top of that, and then doing both hands, so to see that you go, you know, you come from, not interested in piano to all of a sudden watching a video of you play is just, and then composing your own music is incredible. It's unbelievable. And then to know that that music is just coming to you like a download is, makes it so special. You just want to know, where is it coming from? But it's personal to you too.
Yeah.
So,
It's personal to me, plus there's something in the music that I don't understand, and that is I think that it somehow affects people's brains.
mhm.
I've had people from all over the place, come up to me afterwards at concerts and say, I was seeing visions, this happened, that happened. I've even had people ask if they could come to my home and lie down under the piano so they can feel the vibration while it's being played.
Wow.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of when I first listened to it, I just felt, wow, this is like, music, f- it's coming from you, through you, but but it's like, is this coming from the other side? That's what I first thought, and I just thought, I gotta hear this and how special it is. And it just it goes through so many emotions, which the human experience, right? We we have um all these emotions we go through life. So that's really special. And that documentary you're featured in really does a nice job of talking about how music affects our brain and um, the pleasure center of our brain and and all of that. It really breaks down into the science part of it, which is really cool. I haven't read that, it's Oliver Sacks' book, but I'm going to now. What do you hope that your experience and your music communicate to those people who haven't had, a transformative experience like this?
My hope is that it will bring them some understanding that our spirit does not die, that there's more to our existence than just flowing through life. We're here for a reason, and there is a whole nother world of things that need to be experienced that, you know, you're told don't exist. So, I'm living proof that these things do exist, and it's important for people to consider them and to accept the fact that, you know, death is just another step in the progression of life.
Hmm.
And it's not the end of anything. It's just you're turning the page to a different chapter.
Yeah, I loved how you described it as just it was like a natural progression of going from one moment to, like nothing changed. You still felt like you.
Your purpose of being here is to grow spiritually and to help others along the path. And and those are the most important things to learn here. And it took a lot for me to learn it, um, but I have since tried to live that.
Yeah, that's what they say, living authentically, right? Like
Yeah.
doing what you love. And I'm glad that you're still. I don't know how often do you play. I don't know if you go down to your piano every evening or
Yeah,
is
I
it a.
try to play every day,
Mhm.
and but I think about it all the time.
And you had said that you might possibly, I mean, there's more in store. We might be looking at maybe getting to see a book from you at some point. So,
Yeah,
uh,
I'm hoping that I will get my butt in gear and get it done.
yeah, so we know Oliver Sacks would be pushing you for that, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
you sure would. You sure would.
Thank you for taking time to share with us today. It means so much. You continue to do this, service to others. So thank you again for your time.
Absolutely, Katie. Thank you for doing it.
Dr. Tony Cicoria, thank you so much for sharing your remarkable journey with us. Your story is a reminder that life can change in an instant, and sometimes those moments can reveal gifts we never expected. To everyone listening, if today's conversation moved you, take some time to explore his music. It's every bit as powerful as the story behind it. And thank you so much for tuning in and listening, and we'll see you next time.